Hey guys, it's Cauliflower, and today I am now filming my probably fourth video of the day. This video, however, has nothing to do with any beauty or hauls or anything like that. Actually, I was inspired to do a video that probably has been coming for quite some time, but because I watched somebody whom I just recently became acquainted with and who I already really feel as though that somehow cosmically we're connected. She did a friend mail video, and it was, to me, it was about something I sent her. You know, when I meet people for the first time, and especially on the YouTube circuit or the Facebook circuit, and I kind of find out a little bit about them and what they like and things like that, I tend to just, want to give them stuff because that's basically how I feel. And her name is Erica. Her channel name is GetFitWithFish. And this isn't really the reason why I'm doing this kind of a video. I do, however, want to say that this is a very sensitive matter on behalf of myself and of Erica. And the only reason I chose to do this video is because she did put it out there already. So I wanted to kind of give a response to that video and give you guys a little bit of a background on my own personal, I guess my own personal history as far as depression goes. Now, I don't normally talk about it. I haven't talked about it in length. I've said things about things I felt passionate about in other videos. I've mentioned it in certain other capacities where, I've spoken about having a panic attack. I've spoken about my feelings about suicide and Robin Williams and how that connected. But I never really gave you guys the background of my own story. And it's a very hard thing to do because I guess at the age I'm at and also at the place in my life I'm at, to kind of dissect about, I'd say, at least 25, 26 years of going through this, it's hard to kind of like give you pieces of it in maybe 10-minute, 15-minute video. But here's how it's gonna go. Erica made a video and she was talking about how some people on YouTube end up being like YouTube doctors, so to speak. Like they have this feeling that they need to kind of give you advice when they really know nothing about what they're talking about, or tell you that you should just, do this or that, and that will pretty much cure you of your ailments or whatever. And I agree with her on that aspect. I don't have that personally because I don't ask for it. When I say anything about my depression, I am not asking for anybody's help. I'm not asking for anybody's qualifying answers. I guess that's the way she put it. I am not asking for anybody to give me any sort of perspective outside of maybe their own personal history. I have said this before. Depression is personal. It is not the same for everybody. People do have maybe similarities, but it doesn't mean that everybody has the same type of depression and one thing fixes everybody. That's not the way it works. My story is this. I grew up with my mom and grandmother. I lived with those two. My mom was a bad alcoholic. My father was not in the picture. They had been divorced since I was 5 years old. I stopped seeing my father when I was very young at the request of my mother. She didn't want to have him around. She had her reasons for it. I did not remember much about my father to really understand, but I knew that there was a missing part of it. So that was a good chunk of my life kind of steering towards not having my father around, which, did indicate that I would probably have some issues down the line, which I did. My mother's alcoholism was pretty bad as I was a young child, from the ages of 5 up until probably my early teens. I was one of those girls that just went to school and came home, and it was enough coming home to a shitstorm, but my school education and all that was another whole story. School was not fun for me. I lived in a neighborhood in the Bronx. I grew up in the Bronx, lived in a neighborhood where this color meant something. I was part of a minority because I wasn't Spanish, I wasn't black, I wasn't anything but white. I was picked on, I was bullied, I was, you name it. And on top of having at home all the problems I had, growing up was very difficult, especially without having my father around and having to deal with my mother and my grandmother, who also was the main breadwinner. She was the one who worked. She was the one who went on the train every single day, went to work in a jewelry store down in Manhattan. And she is the one who pretty much raised me and fed us and clothed us and, provided. She provided everything. My mother had stopped working in her mid-20s. She developed what is called agoraphobia. For those who don't know what that is, it is a fear of being amongst people. It's a fear of being outward. It's a fear of society, so to speak. She became very agoraphobic for many, many years with her alcohol, pairing with her alcoholism. So that had a lot to do with the way I was raised. Some say I was raised maybe in a shelter, sheltered. I would say that it was the complete opposite. I saw more reality than I needed to see. I grew up before I needed to grow up. And therefore, it contributed to me having depression. I knew from a very young age that I wasn't right. I knew that something was wrong with me, but I couldn't pinpoint what it was, and I didn't want to bother anybody with it because my mother was enough of a handful, and my grandmother had her ailments, and we also had my uncle in the picture who was also an alcoholic, and that was another thing. So I was kind of last on the totem pole of dealing with issues. As I got older, it became more and more apparent that I had some pretty bad depression. I can remember very early on just feeling so out of place all the time, struggling in school, having mood swings, having highs, lows, feeling very empty, feeling very displaced. I befriended younger kids. I didn't like anybody my own age. I felt like they were too mean, too judgmental, too just nothing. My brain couldn't comprehend interacting with anybody my age because I didn't feel it. I felt older, and sometimes I felt like I was a mother too, to my mother, to kids, to adult situations. I felt like I had to become an adult real quick. By the age of 11 was my first attempt at taking an overdose of aspirin as a means of trying to get out of my bad thought processes and all the bad stuff going on, triggers, dealing with my mother's alcoholism. I couldn't at 11 years old. So I tried to take some aspirin. They were children's aspirin. It really didn't do anything, but it was my first attempt. Some years later, as I got older, as I became a teenager, it got worse. It got a lot worse, especially in my school. My grades went up and down with my moods. This is what I would hear from, parent-teacher conferences. My mother was also very violent in her alcoholism and very volatile with me. So there was that going on. She was volatile with my grandmother. That was going on. My uncle was also very volatile. So there was a lot of stuff going on. And by the time I was 15, 16 years old, I had it. And I remember again attempting to, this time now, take a grown-up medication, and it was my grandmother's Xanax. And though I didn't take enough to kill me, I took a handful of it. And basically cried out for help. I cried out for help so much that I became very violent when the ambulance people came to pick me up. And I will never forget being in my uncle's room because he lived with us at the time. And he had a loose board on his dresser, and I picked it up and I swung it. And it was just a mental breakdown of everything. That was my first time that I went to a clinical hospital. It certainly went from there. So not to get all-encompassing in my childhood, my depression was very, very, very apparent, and it was a problem that I suffered with for quite so many years. When I got to be old enough, about 20, 21 years old, I started seeking therapists, and even prior to that, I had been in hospitals and dealing with that, but I had never seen therapists on a regular basis, and I started to see therapists. I also was dealing with a lot of anger issues, so I was very on the opposition of a lot of therapists, psychiatrists, psychologists' opinions. At the age of 21, I was diagnosed with borderline personality disorder. I was diagnosed by somebody who was about my age, because I was about 21, he was about 23. He was I'm going to say he was probably like an intern doing his first couple of cases for his therapy, what have you. His name is Ryan. I'll never forget him. And he's the one who diagnosed me. And I turned around and I said to him, I didn't know that your personality could have a disorder. Thought I was safe in that area. But borderline personality disorder, from what I gathered then, meant that I basically saw no gray area. I basically had very volatile relationships. I had high dependencies on those relationships. I had a lot of anger issues. I had disassociation issues. I harmed myself in many ways, mentally, not physically, but mentally. Relationships with adults or anybody of the other, form of either like myself. I wanted to help them. I wanted to cure them, because I thought that if I cured them, it would somehow end up making me feel better. And I can go into that in another video. That's a whole other video about relationships and how I got involved with the people I got involved with. What I wanted to touch upon was the borderline personality disorder. I did a little research back then, and I was angry. I didn't really believe in any of what it was saying. It was saying I was pretty much short of being a sociopath, which I wasn't. I was just sick, and sick of being sick, and sick of being misunderstood. That was my main thing. Like, I just couldn't get myself across enough to people. I used to write when I was very young. I was very creative that way. That was my outlet, and I loved it. And I shortly after my teens or my early 20s, I stopped because my writing became so much of a debilitating depression, I couldn't do it anymore. It became to the point where I'm reading what I was saying, and I was getting more depressed as I was reading it. So I stopped the one thing I loved and the one outlet I had. From there, music became my big thing. Music was my big thing. It still is my big thing. Through it, and expressing through just listening to it, and later on, of course, singing and all that, became a huge part of how I would deal with my depression, and also what would trigger my depression. Till this day, it's going to sound strange and stupid, but till this day, I cannot listen to Bohemian Rhapsody by Queen. The second I hear it, it triggers back to my mother, and triggers back to all the horrible things that I was listening to on a Saturday night, where she was so out of control with her alcoholism that I can't even listen to like the first few bars of it. The second I hear it, I flip. I mean, it's gotten better. I don't want to say I flip like I flip out and I have like an episode. I can't. And it's so stupid, it's a song, but it's association. So that's a lot of what happens with, I guess, this borderline personality disorder. A lot of association and disassociation. In my 30s, my 20s were the worst, I think. My 20s were the worst. I did a number on myself. I really did. There were a lot of attempts on my life. There were a lot of going back and forth to hospitals and therapists, and I moved to Florida for a year and a half, and I even out there, I went to a therapist because I was in a very bad relationship with somebody who was a addict at the time, and I was trying to do everything I possibly could to be, it sounds weird. It's almost like be an addict too, so we can get along, that kind of a thing. I went to meetings. I talked the lingo. Whatever. Until I found out that that had nothing to do with me personally, that my addiction was that I was already so dependent on people and how they would make me feel. So that was my addiction. It was, if they were good, I was good. If they were bad, I was bad. I don't know what cures anybody. I'm going to say this. Throughout my 20s and 30s, I took everything under the sun, anything that was offered to me. But because of my stigma with medication and because of my education and intelligence, I quickly learned that a lot of it was a bunch of shit. A lot of it either altered me in ways that I don't even want to go through, as far as like my personality would alter my personality. It would alter